I'm Jason Kowalski, and I fight climate change with 350.org. For the last 10 years, I've been in the trenches of pipeline fights like Keystone XL and Dakota Access Pipeline, connecting mass movements in the street like the People's Climate March to the formal levers of power in Washington, D.C. So I just kind of gave a teaser. I'm going to let our panelists talk about the meat about what's happening in California in September. But so my first question for every panelist is, on September 8th, Jerry Braun is hosting the Global Climate Action Summit in California. Now, a lot of folks are mobilizing around this summit, both on the ground in San Francisco, around the country, and honestly around the world. This is a high stakes moment for climate and potentially have a big impact on our national political conversation. Why is this moment so important for the climate movement? And why should all the good folks at Netroots be watching what's happening on the ground in California? Senator deLeon, you first.
Well, thank you so very much, Jason, for the very kind introduction of my person. And I'm honored to be here with each and every one of you and with the wonderful panelists that are really going to hit a variety of really critical points that impact the human condition for all Californians, for all Americans throughout the country. I think the eyes have been watching, the eyes of the nation as well as the world have been watching California very closely. In spite of the president and the former EPA administrator, Scott Pruitt, and his replacement, California has been moving forward. With or without Washington, D.C. California is committed to move forward on our clean energy goals by sending a message to the rest of the country as well as the rest of the world that we're not going to roll back on clean air or clean water, safe drinking water acts, nor are we going to roll back the latest attack with regards to fuel efficiency standards. I want to put this in context because, say for example, if you live in Alabama and you drive a Ford F-150 pickup truck, internal combustion, but it's a brand new one, you get 28 mpg. 10 years ago, you got 18 mpg. And you go farther for that tank of gasoline because of the fuel efficiency standards from California, which were nationalized by then President Barack Obama for the entire nation. So whether you voted for Donald Trump or for Bernie Sanders, having more money in your pocket and actually going farther from point A to point B is a good thing in terms of fuel efficiency standards. But that's why when it comes to the September 8th Climate Change Summit in California, it is absolutely critical that we all organize, whether you're part of this summit or there are going to be so many organizations and entities around this summit. It's going to be like a mini summit, actually, quite frankly. And it is our opportunity to send a very clear political message to the powers that be, specifically in Washington, that with or without them, we're going to move forward. That's just the bottom line. Even though the president has pulled out of the Paris Accords in 2015, which many of us were present there today to witness a historic groundbreaking, accord that was ratified by more than 185 nations. Our commitment and our recognition that climate change is an existential threat to our society as we know it today. It's an existential threat to our economy. It is an existential threat to our children and the right to breathe clean air into their lungs. So a lot is at stake, without a doubt, come September. But I'm looking forward to this conference. We're looking forward to moving policies that, again, will continue to improve the human condition for all Californians and for all Americans.
Thank you, Senator. Kassie?
Thank you. I want to give everybody a little introduction to the Braun's Last Chance campaign. We are more than 800 organizations, conservation, faith, labor, environmental justice, and many others who are united in our call on Governor Braun to protect Californians and our climate by addressing California's own dirty oil extraction before the climate summit. And we're asking him to stop approving new oil and gas wells in California, to end neighborhood drilling, to announce a just transition plan to phase out our existing oil extraction with support to the workers in the communities that are most affected, and for no new fossil fuel projects and no new petrochemical plants. It may surprise you, but maybe not. to hear in the age of Trump, Governor Braun called out for his lack of leadership. But it's absolutely critical because California climate policy will be the blueprint for the next Democratic president and for the world over, and we have to have a blueprint that actually solves the problem. And right now, California's climate policy doesn't, and here's why. What you need to know on the climate piece is that our fossil fuel budget, like a household budget, is already overspent. So there's more than enough oil, gas, and coal in already producing fields and mines globally that if we dug it all up and burn it, we'd go way past 1.5 degrees of man-made warming. We all know that would be catastrophic. Just look at what we're living through right now. And the essential implication of that is that no new fossil fuel development can be compatible with preserving a safe climate. And most of the world's oil, gas, and coal fields need to be shut down before their reserves are fully depleted. That's a tall order, but that's just what the climate reality is right now, and it means that our leaders have to stop approving fossil fuel projects. And beneath its green veneer, Jerry Brown's California is an oil state. Since 1900, only Texas has produced more oil than California, and we're still one of the country's top oil producers. The oil from California is heavy and dirty. It takes massive amounts of energy and horrible techniques like fracking and like steam injection to produce it. Because of this, 3/4 of California's oil is more climate damaging than oil from the tar sands of Alberta, Canada. That's a little known but hugely important fact. And Governor Braun has approved 20,000 new oil wells in his most recent 2 terms alone. He's summarily fired oil regulators who blew the whistle on unsafe and illegal oil industry practices, and there's really not any favor or special treatment that he hasn't granted to the oil industry. And he's done all this while continuing to wear the mantle of a climate hero, and this simply can't continue. What you need to know about health is that all of this oil extraction poisons the air we breathe and the water we drink. It makes people really sick. In California, the oil companies can put their wells anywhere they want in the middle of neighborhoods, and kids are sick all the time. And it won't surprise you to hear that low-income communities of color get most of the wells and most of the pollution, and it exacerbates the environmental justice crisis that we have. And in the Brown's Last Chance campaign, we hold the health and the justice and the climate pieces of this all equally. And we hope that you'll join us at brownslastchance.org. We are demanding that Braun take action now, or his summit, private McSummit, will be ringed with protesters in September. That's all I wanted to say to start out, and look forward to the conversation. Thanks for coming.
Hi, good afternoon. Russia notwithstanding, before the Russia story came out, a lot of the reason why the Democrats didn't win in this last election is because the Democrats stayed home. And largely because we have some inconsistencies in leadership within the Democratic Party, that rhetoric always sounds fantastic. Sadly, the actions that back up that rhetoric often ring hollow. So this takes the many forms. And we've sadly seen it within this administration. And what it's translated to is health impacts for frontline communities. We have studies in the state of California that came out years ago that looked at fracking, that looked at well stimulation. And as our state scientists, who went through a rigorous process to make sure that we were getting independent state scientists to look at the data, that we weren't getting corporate shills in there or whatever, and they went through this process and they realized, wow, hey, it's not fracking that's our only problem, right? They found out that in fact that the chemicals that they're utilizing within oil operations in the state of California, whether they're fracking in well stimulation or they are quote unquote conventional operations where they say that they're conditioning a well, prepping a well, doing routine well maintenance. That's one of their favorites for using lots of hydrofluoric acid. Hydrofluoric acid is an air toxin, and the Center for Biological Diversity, Kassie's shop, did an analysis of state-recorded data. So the South Coast Air Quality Management District in the LA area is the only air quality management district in the state of California that records what's going into the ground. And so we know that over a 3-year period, the oil industry used 98 million pounds of air toxins in LA County alone in oil drilling operations. 3 years ago, our state scientists highlighted in the California Council on Science and Technology report that living near these operations was toxic, and because of that, they recommended putting in human health buffer zones around all oil operations. That could have been done 3 years ago. But here we are 3 years later, 3.5 years later, with exposures to these chemicals continuing in our own backyard in Jerry Brown's California. And so while I deeply appreciate the governor's leadership, I mean, who else is taking on Donald Trump, right? Am I right? A lot of people are actually, talk to Gavin. But I will really appreciate him for trying to make this his issue. And I also recognize, though, that Abraham Lincoln would not have been remembered for abolishing slavery if he had said, hey, let's regulate this. There's a whole economy based on this slavery thing, right? I mean, these are the arguments that he could have used, and that actually were being used at this time. And these are the arguments that we're hearing being used around fossil fuels currently in this country. But what we must remember that it was the abolitionists who came forward, people of faith and other activists pushed forward to say, no, no, no. You are the leader that can do this. And so that's where we're leaving it with Jerry Brown, is that he has an immense opportunity on the global stage to show what leadership is, to be a leader that actually gets people excited about the Democratic Party again. Be a leader that gets people excited to participate in making change. I would love to celebrate Jerry Brown at his Global Climate Action Summit. Where, walk down the street holding a big sign, congratulations. But we need human health buffer zones. We need to start moving ourselves off of fossil fuels, and we need a leader that's not doing deals with the oil industry. We need a leader that is standing up to the oil industry. And so that's what we're calling on him to do, and that is what I am hoping and praying we shall see.
Thank you, David.
Who here was at Netroots last year? Went to the California caucus? Few hands. So if you remember me from last year's California caucus, everybody hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. You might remember me sort of yelling in a very haphazard way that we should not do this march in San Francisco on September 8th because I didn't want to give Jerry Brown the oxygen that he was craving. Do the march elsewhere. Do the march some other time. What is to prevent him from co-opting a march? What is to prevent him from getting up at the front of the march and declaring that he too is going to rise for climate and jobs and justice? Because honestly, who isn't in favor of climate, jobs, and justice? I got overruled. And it makes sense, I get it. Braun is doing the McSummit in San Francisco, and that's where the oxygen is, and that's where the march is going to be. But I do finally have an answer to the question that I asked a year ago. What's to prevent him from co-opting our march? The answer is, we are the people who are going to prevent him from co-opting that march. He's not the climate leader that he thinks he is, but we are the climate leaders that we have been waiting for, to paraphrase a certain president. It's our voices that need to be heard loud and clear from San Francisco to New Orleans, to New York, to everywhere in the United States. We have demands, not just asks, not asks, but demands. And if Braun is going to be taken seriously, he should meet them. Now, do I have a second for a word story here? Okay. I have a bit of a unique perspective on this, on Braun and demands. Because about a year ago, I called him out on his dealings with the oil companies. One of the bills that he was writing came out of the oil company's wish list. Yeah, I know, I'm not making that up. They had a 10-point piece of paper. He turned it into his proposals. It became a bill. I screamed, I yelled. I wrote a petition that got like 10,000 signatures in 2 hours, calling on him to stop being Chevron's stenographer. I'm told that his head exploded. He got his revenge at the bill signing ceremony. He got the bill through, and then at the bill signing ceremony, he made a point of singling out political terrorists. That's me. Terrorist. I'm a political terrorist. So I'm telling you guys from a bit of experience that he may not appreciate demands. He's a pretty stubborn old man. That shouldn't stop us. We still have right on our side. He still theoretically wants to do the right thing. And one of the critical things that I hope is going to happen at the summit is Senator deLeon's bill SB 100 is going to be passed by then. We're going to know its fate by August 31st when the legislative session ends. And the single best thing that Braun could do to prove that he's actually the climate leader that he says he is go get that bill signed at his McSummit. That's my dream.
All right, thank you, RL, and thanks everybody. Just as a moderator, I want to resonate a little bit with what I'm hearing. The senator said there isn't just one summit, there are a number of summits. We have governors from around the country. We have foreign leaders from all over the world coming to talk about what they're doing to act on climate. We also have a movement rising up from the grassroots up saying, this isn't just what's doable politically right now, this is what justice demands, this is what science demands, and really holding folks' feet to the fire on that with all sorts of tactics, direct action, marches. I want to really focus on one common thread of a lot of these actions that hasn't come up yet, which is the role of frontline communities in our movement. It's not necessarily represented by the folks in the panel, but from Keystone XL to Standing Rock to the Bayou Bridge pipeline fight right here in Louisiana, one common thread of success in the climate movement is frontline leaders leading the way and national organizations and coalitions following their lead to great political success. And I want to ask each panelist to say a little bit about what that looks like on the ground in California. Why is it so imperative to create coalitions that center frontline leadership in the climate fight? Starting with you, Senator.
Thank you much, Jason. Frontline communities, without question, are absolutely critical because it is frontline communities that are disproportionately impacted by both carbon dioxide emissions, CO2, which is atmospheric, and by criteria pollutants, NOx, SOx, particulate matter 2.5, all of them ugly brown haze, those toxic pollutants that our children breathe into their lungs every single day. The number one reason for absenteeism in our public school system is due to asthma. And when a child's asthma is aggravated or there's an asthma attack, and when a mother, especially if it's a single mother, loses a day's work because she has to spend the whole day with her child in an emergency room, because that child doesn't have access to any quality health care, she runs the risk of not making her rent at the end of the month. And this is how these harmful toxic pollutants in frontline communities, environmental justice communities, are truly impacted. When I became an elected official for the very first time, a member of the Assembly, it's the first time I was ever elected to any political body, I had observed the environmental movement, and I had, my fair share of constructive criticisms of the environmental movement, perhaps sometimes being out of touch, highly elitist, and not focused enough on frontline communities. So a very controversial issue, no doubt about it, even among the panelists, is the issue of cap and trade and the auction revenues that are generated by polluters in California, short of another stream of revenue which would be a carbon tax. But with cap and trade, I wanted to make sure that at least 25% of auction revenues were invested in communities that are disproportionately impacted by CO2 as well as criteria pollutants. Invest these monies in energy efficiency, weatherization. Invest these monies in distributed generation, rooftop solar for low-income families. Invest these monies into bundling rebates for low-income communities that don't have access to the latest, the greatest, and cleanest technologies. We have to always stay focused on low-income communities because, quite frankly, they are the canary in the coal mines. They are the canary in the coal mines because they suffer the brunt of the worst harmful toxic pollution, whether it's emitted through the air, whether it's groundwater, whether it's the issue of fracking, in communities, especially as Kassie and David just mentioned, in communities in frontline communities I guess it's a nice word for euphemism for black and brown communities, poor communities, even white communities that are poor and don't have the financial wherewithal to have access to a beautiful front yard and backyard with trees and open space, but rather it's your income status that dictates where you'll have access to. And if you have to live in an area that's been zoned to be next to a chrome plating facility plant where they leak, into the water wells, lead, it has an impact on children of color. So frontline communities should always be on the front line, on the minds of policymakers who make the decisions on a variety of issues when it comes to harmful toxic pollutants, when it comes to climate, when it comes to the environment, because they are often at the brunt of the worst conditions imaginable. And ultimately, all taxpayers, if you're a Republican, if you're a Democrat, doesn't make a difference. All the taxpayers foot the bill because of the healthcare costs of what happens to these frontline communities. So that's why it behooves us to move the policies with intentionality, with a sense of purpose that is very well detailed without the market forces dictating exactly who gets access to the latest and greatest and cleanest technologies.
Thank you very much.
I just want to take a minute to celebrate a couple of the incredible frontline victories recently in California. So the Center on Race, Poverty, and the Environment, and activists in and around the town of Arvin, California, which is in the middle of Kern County, where oil production is highly concentrated in California, just won a health buffer within the last couple of weeks. Huge long-term battle. We have an incredibly powerful coalition called Standing Together Against Neighborhood Drilling of environmental justice and community groups in Los Angeles, fighting to end neighborhood drilling in Los Angeles. In Alameda County, the Board of Supervisors just voted to deny permits to continue the one oil field that is still operating in Alameda County, ending fossil fuel in Alameda County. Yeah, things are changing fast, and over the last couple of years, communities in the Bay Area and Central California have defeated these terrible oil train terminal proposals, so to bring in more oil from out of state to the refineries. and 3 were voted down somewhere in the approval process, and another one was defeated in court. 6 counties have banned fracking and restricted oil development in California, and the Coalition to Protect San Luis Obispo County has the latest on the ballot in November to ban petroleum extraction as land use in fracking in San Luis Obispo County. So things are moving fast, and it's the people that are most affected that are leading the way. I work for the Center for Biological Diversity. I started working full-time on polar bears and the Arctic. The first thing that I look at every morning when I get up in the morning is the Arctic sea ice, because the warming in the Arctic and the acceleration of climate change is having an effect on all of us. And my organization believes it's important to protect plants and animals for their own sake, and because all of human society is harmed by extinction and by the deterioration of our natural ecosystems. And I work on animals, but I also spend a huge proportion of my time supporting frontline community battles on fossil fuels, because we need the government to address this problem. We need transformative and innovative and cross-cutting solutions to the root cause of the climate crisis. We're not going to be able to win otherwise. And it's a heavy lift, but we can do it, because most people want clean air and clean water and a just society, and we just need to work together.
And folks deserve that. Everyone deserves that. But only one portion of the society really regularly gets to enjoy it. And so privilege is a really big factor here. And also a huge moral responsibility. Because while we are celebrating the Arvin victory, and that was, and kudos to Mayor Siegal for getting it done, and I know that was a long, hard-fought battle to make that happen. It is a 300-foot setback. Physicians for Social Responsibility Los Angeles is saying, at a bare minimum, and the data, the scientific data supports this, that we should have 2,500-foot setbacks around all oil operations because of these chemicals and these air toxins that they're using in these operations. That it is literally unhealthful to live near oil wells. And in fact, there are studies out of the Colorado School of Public Health that say that they found toxic levels above the safe allowable limits by the EPA 5 times the safe allowable limit that were found a half a mile away from an oil and gas well. We have this data, we know. It's not like we don't know that we're poisoning people. So while it's good, and I appreciate the wins that are happening, Stand Against Neighborhood Drilling, that coalition is fantastic. And what about the kids in Kern County? What about the kids in Oxnard? And in places like Kern County, where you have our governor has appointed a 30-year veteran of the oil and gas industry to oversee the Division of Oil and Gas and Geothermal Resources in that area, guess what? Regulations aren't really all too well implemented, and it's very hard to win protections from local government. There will be no Kern County installed 2,500-foot setback. But all the more reason why people in the rest of the state should care. Because if it was your water, your air, your community, you would want somebody to stand up and be there for you and call for these protections. There's a young woman that we've been working with named Nayeli Kowo, who was getting poisoned in her own home because of the Elenco drilling site when she was 7 years old. Literally getting rushed to the emergency room, nosebleeds, breathing ailments. Now she has a weakened immune system. She has asthma. She gets sick all the time. And she's now 15, an amazing young leader who's been, thankfully, thank God, speaking out about her experience so that hopefully others don't have to go through it. But that was a regular experience for the entire community that lived around us. So, because we've known this, and because we've had this data, we have delivered over 500,000 petitions to the governor in the past 7 years. We've held press conferences, health forums, put out reports. I mean, how many reports have you put out, Kassie? Something like 4 or 5 reports about these things, right? That it's not like we haven't been, like we've rallied, 5,000 people outside of the Capitol, 10,000 people in the streets of Oakland, calling for an end to fracking, calling for an end to extreme extraction. And the governor instead incorporated the entire wish list of the Western States Petroleum Association into his cap and trade bill. Clearly, he's not either listening to us or doesn't see that we are anything for him to worry about, or that the progressive wing of his party isn't something that he needs to speak to or respond to. So because of that, we're taking this message on August 20th, and we will be doing an action that we're calling Braun's Reckoning there in the state capitol. And you can get more information about what we're up to at brownsreckoning.org. But calling for him to stand up to the oil industry, and we're gonna force the question, whose side are you on? And we will be sitting in to call on the governor to stand up to the oil industry. And so we would love to have you join us, because all of these petitions, all of these press conferences, all of these reports, all of these health forums, all of these studies clearly are not getting through to this governor. And we need to make our voices heard, because that is our job. Our job is to look out for one another, and our job is to make sure that the power of this democracy stays in the hands of the people, not the big polluting corporations that are trying to run our state. So, I warmly invite everyone within the sound of my voice, here in this room and online, to come join us in Sacramento on August 20th and go to brownsreckoning.org.
Thank you, David.
I can't possibly follow that. Okay, I need to say something about water. I go to New Orleans, and I go travel around the country for conferences like Netroots Nation, and what I do is I go out to the rivers and I stare at all that water that's actually in riverbeds. And then sometimes there's water that falls from the sky, and it's the strangest thing. If you haven't been kept up on the news back home, the Reading fire was started by somebody with a flat tire. The tire went flat enough that the rim was scraping along, set up a spark, went into the brush, and that's how you get to 143-mile-an-hour tornadoes, fire tornadoes. In Mendocino, which is not anywhere near that car fire, we are now up to the 6th largest wildfire in the state's history. It's burned an average of 1,200 acres every single day for the last 8 days. The Ferguson fire has crossed Highway 41 and is now in Yosemite Park. And so my message to Jason and anybody else who wants to talk about California frontline communities, we are all on the front line now. Climate change in California is real, and it is here, and it's hurting us. So you want to go live tweet that. We are all on the front lines of climate change in California. One of the reasons why my organization, I'm going to just do a fangirl note of privilege here. One of the reasons why my organization has backed Kevin deLeon for US Senate is because he speaks with more authenticity than anybody else I've ever heard what's happening in the frontline communities, how people are being hurt, and how we can turn that from a negative into a positive. What is it, 500,000? I'll let you say it. 500,000 jobs?
500,000 jobs that have been created in California in the clean energy space, and that's 10 times more jobs in the clean energy space in California alone than there are coal mining jobs in all of America. So it's a 10-to-1 ratio.
And Senator deLeon speaks with authenticity more than anybody else I've heard, because he's walked that walk. He's been in those communities. He knows what it's like, and he's got an extraordinary track record of doing things about it. So, yeah, frontline communities, we are here. And I say that with respect and love for New Orleans, because I am falling in love with this city. It is also a frontline community. So is Miami. So is Denver. So really is the rest of the world. In one way or another, we're all going to be affected by it. It's just that in California, we have a chance to be a national laboratory and to go out and do the right thing. Hopefully we'll get some oil wells shut down. Hopefully we'll get SB 100 passed. Hopefully we will be that beacon of hope in an uncertain world. I'm stealing literally from your speech here.
All right, thank you, RL.